Hey guys, and welcome back to another one of my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. review videos, and today we're gonna be talking the third episode of the 6th season, Fear and Loathing, on the planet of Kitson. Now, as already predicted, this episode had a ton of references to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But that's not the only thing that this episode was packed with. It was packed with a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of references, and a lot of possible hints and theories when it comes to the future of the season, how this season is gonna go down. Okay, so let's start with the part about all the hints that we got on this episode. Now the first part we've discussed so many times on Season 5, which is what are the Chronocoms? Are they like the Watchers? Are they like the Recorders? And we settled on the Recorders. However though, and even though I do agree on the Recorders bit, it's kind of a little bit different over here. With the introduction of the character of Malachi as a Chronocom hunter, we get to know that there are multiple kinds of Chronocoms, all of which put together kind of fit the bill for the Time Variance Authority out of the comics. However though, Enoch on this episode, soiling the name of the Chronocoms, all of that kind of fits with Uatu the Watcher. Yes, Uatu the Watcher did not react that way, but you need to remember that the mission of the Watchers was to watch and observe and not interfere at all in how the universe operates. Now, against those rules put forth by the Watchers, put forth by Uatu's father actually, Uatu's love for the species that he was supposed to observe, basically, and to cut it short, had him interfere left and right, occasionally, but left and right. But at some point as well, something equal to the decommissioning that Enoch was speaking of on this episode did happen to Uatu. He was put on trial for the many crimes, the many violations that he committed of their code of conduct. So yeah, that's basically a little bit of a similarity over there. I think it's a little bit of an Easter egg. I think that they pulled this story, the entire Chronocoms, Chronocom Hunters, the whole 9 yards really, out of so many stories. But yeah though, I suppose I was right on the part where the Chronocom Hunters and the Chronocoms are one and the same. The Chronocom Hunters are just ones that are doing another job within the Chronocom society. All of it put together makes them like one Time Variance Authority kind of beings. I did speak about that TVA bit before, and I'm gonna be revisiting it on my theory video later on this week. But moving on though, I think that this season is not just pulling out of the Time Variance Authority and a little bit out of Uatu the Watcher, but it's also possibly pulling out of the Incursion storyline out of the comics. Now you cannot speak about Incursion out of the comics and not speak about map makers. And when you speak about map makers and then look at Coulson and Jacko on that stinger scene of this episode, you're thinking, yeah, that's probably what's going on over here. That thing that they were using, that thing that looked on the trailer like it is a weapon, something that they will use in the destruction of the planet, but then doesn't seem to be a weapon. That thing that they use to draw a map in the stars. That thing that talk about the stars, the drawing of a map in the stars, kind of makes you think of the map makers. It's not exactly the same, by the way, but they are pulling out of that kind of story. Now, I'm not saying that Coulson or Sarge is basically working with the Chronocoms or the Chronocom Hunters. I don't think that Sarge is trying to fix the timeline either. I think that it is possible, though, that due to the timeline change at the end of Season 5, due to the presence of multiple anomalies I'm going to be talking about in a moment, the Sarge team, who are a group of mercenaries, so they've basically been hired by someone, are similar to the map makers, but not exactly the map makers, and what they are trying to do over here is eliminate this Earth. Because in an Incursion event in the comics, one of the solutions is to eliminate one of the two Earths that are about to collide together in order to make sure that the collision never happens, in order to make sure that one of the two Earths remains intact and the rest of the universe for the other Earth, the one that gets destroyed, does remain intact as well. Now that isn't really mutually exclusive with anything that we've talked about before, the identity of Sarge. But however though, let's leave detailed theories, the tying up of all the theories for later in the week, and let's stay focused on this week's episode. But alright though, why is Fitz being hunted? Now I think that Enoch is being hunted because in this timeline, there's no extinction level event, so Enoch should not have interfered, and Fitz should not have been in a pot to start with. But that explains though why the Chronocom Hunters are hunting Enoch, but it doesn't though explain why Fitz is being hunted. Now I'm gonna expand on the idea I'm gonna offer right now in detail later on this week. I'm gonna add a drawing in the whole 9 yards really for you to be content and whatnot, a diagram of sorts. But nonetheless, I'm just gonna summarize it right now. You've got 3 Fitzes in 2 timelines, one in the old broken timeline, and 2 different versions of Fitz in the newly created timeline. And by different, I mean that they are not one and the same. unlike the ones in the previous timeline. One is sleeping, going to the future. That's the past self of the same one that came back from the future. No, that's not the case. These are two completely different versions of Fitz. Two that are gonna have two different futures, and that got duplicated for this new timeline the moment that it branched out. So the fact that we got two Fitzes, even though one of them did die, but that was a completely different future than the one that he had in that other timeline, that's gotta make one of them an anomaly, especially that Fitz that died was very active in the changing of the timeline. Now that's why Malachi on this episode states,
Earth is where he died. Over a year ago, if I'm not mistaken.
What are you?
A hunter. As I said previously, you and your friends are out of time.
Now by the way, and even though this sounds like it makes absolutely no sense, it actually makes sense, and I'm just applying the rules that were set forth by Endgame. But I'm gonna circle back to that in more detail later on this week, diagrams and all. But okay though, I'm gonna skip over the part with Deke from the trailer. I'm gonna be talking about that in detail anyway on my trailer breakdown. And I'm gonna be focusing right now on the rest of this episode, the funny moments, the Easter eggs, the references, and this episode was just so full of them. Now first and foremost, Malachi is introduced right at the beginning of the episode, and he does look like some kind of Terminator-like character, even though the Terminator title this season so far would go to Coulson. I'd call him the Coulsonator. Now we also get to meet the customs officer, Pretorius Price, and the actor is just hilarious. I love this actor. This guy is a semi-regular guest star on the Blacklist, and every time he shows up, I'm just laughing like crazy. And the way he talks, his facial expressions on this episode as well, did do that for me. Now we've got Jemma on this episode talking about wanting to stay, keep looking for Fitz, and Daisy being the leader of this team denying her request. Kind of a little bit wise that they've got someone who wouldn't make stupid decisions based on emotions leading this team. However though, Jemma's smarts put her in the right place to find Fitz, and she was right on that one, and her stance is kind of understandable. I mean, after all, this is Fitz. But in the meanwhile though, we get to watch the very same sneak peek that we did watch a couple of days ago. And the biggest two things about that scene from the sneak peek is how Enoch gives it all up. We need to do this and do that, get a pod, go to Jupiter. And it's kind of really funny over there. And the other thing is those treats that Fitz was about to eat one of. The ones that we see in action later on. But however, it's another thing that gets explained out of that cast photo that we got a few weeks before the season aired. They are the very same treats right in front of Deke, and considering they got them all high on this episode, I'm assuming over here that it was a good idea to put them in front of Deke. Not saying anything, but if I tell you before the airing of this season, before we watch the trailers for this season, who do you expect to get high on the upcoming season, you'd probably end up thinking Deke. But okay, the craziness continues on this episode. We've got them paying Fitz in a very sarcastic manner as well by giving him a gambling chip. And they're not just paying for the snails that he was trying to sell them, they also take his ship away. Now there are a lot of funny moments with Enoch on this episode, his whining close to the end of the episode, him calling himself Fitz's best friend. There's also the fact that he starts explaining, I'm not an android, not this, I'm not that, I'm a Chronocom. The way they've spiced up Enoch, to be more than just the Enoch, the very serious Enoch that we watched on last season, to be this kind of half-human, half-robot kind of thing. That's a real good and a real funny development this season. Now combine the title of the episode with Fitz walking into a casino that's full of aliens, and you've basically gotten Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I'm basically in the middle of a reptile zoo. That's what a Raoul Duke on drugs on the movie says when he's basically in the middle of the casino, only he's seeing everyone in the casino with reptile heads and reptile bodies. But that though applies more to Daisy and Jemma, who are more fitting of the roles of Raoul Duke and Dr. Gonzo from the movie, because the two of them are actually high for the majority of this episode, and the two of them do start seeing things all the way from the moment that they walk into the casino and until the very end of the episode. Now I'm not gonna dwell for too long on the betting bit when it comes to Fitz and Enoch, because Fitz and Enoch are hilarious all the way through, especially Enoch. Now the entire computations thing with Enoch, with the lack of any ability to read people, the lack of social cues, that's flat out Dustin Hoffman on Rain Man. Now for a moment there, Jemma got a solid action scene, jumping around, getting to a gun, but then for the sake of making this episode even lighter without, destroying the integrity of the story, they had Daviiz just hitting Malachi on the head and rendering him unconscious. Now thanks to Nick on Discord for realizing this using our knowledge of the Kree alphabet that we got from so many movies, so many seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but some of the writing in this casino actually reads Home of the Kingmaker. Now there are three people who happen to go by the name on the pages of the comics. The first is Bullseye's father, which is the obvious reference. The second is Wallace, and Wallace is basically a loan shark who gives away loans for favors that he would ask for later, so pretty much sort of like Fitz being collateral over here. And finally there is Prior Cashman, and this kinda rings a bell, just like the name Coulson rings a bell for Sarge, because we've been talking about this since the beginning of the season, a demonic entity that physically feeds on the memories of humans. But seriously though, Fitz trying to convince Enoch to help him bet, to help him make up the money that they need, that's what best friends are for. This kind of tricking a person into thinking that you care more than you actually do, that makes Fitz into the Tom Cruise of this situation, and makes Enoch into the Dustin Hoffman of this situation, and makes this all about Rain Man. But circling back to Jemma and Daisy for a moment here, what happens on the planet of Kitson, and then Daisy finishes the statement, stays on the planet of Kitson. No, it's contagious and burns. So you've got a reference to what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, combined with a touch of an STD joke.
There's even a well-known saying, what happens on the planet of Kitson
stays on Kitson.
No. It's contagious and burns.
Now there is a lot of talk about the brothels of Kitson. The brothels of Kitson are basically the one thing that we did know about Kitson prior to us realizing it's also a gambling place this season, and we knew that from season 5. That's a direct reference to those words that we heard on the 6th episode of season 5. If I wanted to tease, I would have visited the brothels of Kitson. When it comes to the brothels of Kitson though, I think one of the funniest statements on this episode happens to be Jemma's, Fitz better be dead, better dead than in the brothels.
We'll separate and search, and if he's not here...
He better be dead. What? Better dead than in the brothels.
Now we've got Daisy and Jemma pretty much on LSD. Yeah, that's not exactly LSD, but you know what I mean over here. And LSD and drugs and all the tripping was a major component of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The actions of the two though, Daisy and Jemma, are basically the actions of Raoul and Dr. Gonzo on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The mission is Ladies' Night, and Ladies' Night, boys, that's all out of the first trailer for the season. We were wondering that is. And I love that none of us ever imagined that that scene out of that trailer was basically a scene where Daisy was high, fighting aliens while she's high. Now there are a lot of throwbacks to previous seasons. You've got the You Were Living in a Van, that's a reference to Daisy on season 1. I love the we called it the fartmobile bit. There's also the part about Daisy telling Jemma that she had a big nerd face. That's very descriptive of Jemma and Fitz on the first season of the series, and they kinda grew up from there, season after season, so it does as well reflect the kind of growth and development that these two characters have gotten season after season. Now Fitz in a monkey suit, seeing things in general, is all about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but also all about the many times that Fitz has wanted to have a monkey or has mentioned a monkey. Now there's Daisy walking around the casino, narrating everything that's going on, well from her extremely high, extremely tripping perspective, but nonetheless narrating everything, and that's pretty much Johnny Depp on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There's also Jemma's Expecto Patronum, which is basically a Harry Potter reference, the very first of its kind on the season and the second of its kind in the lifetime of the series, since Jemma made the first one on the first season, telling Fitz, I'm not Hermione. But Jemma though telling Daisy, you just had awful luck in that department, when Daisy tells her, I wish I had my own Fitz, that's basically a reference to Ward, who turned out to be Hydra, and then Lincoln, who had to sacrifice himself in order to kill Hive, who now that I think about it, and funny enough, occupied the body of Ward. Now there's all the statements about being fed to Mr. Kitson's Vrelnexian, and that's basically a reference to the Vrelnexians that we met on Season 5. The fact that Mr. Kitson heads this place, the fact that he's got Vrelnexians they're gonna feed people to, kinda reminds us of the Grand Master and his lion pit. There's also the "we will soon be dust and rust," and that could possibly be a reference to Infinity War, like they're basically telling us, yeah, we didn't do it this season, but it's definitely coming. But that's just a possibility, not saying that that's necessarily it, but yeah, just a possibility. With Fitz though actually calling Enoch his best friend, that was kind of funny, and also, goodbye Last Hunter. There's the Malachi escaping from the ship, there is the Fitz and Jemma reunion, and there is the Malachi abducting Fitz last minute. And I told you, this is not going to be the final reunion, it's going to be momentary, that's what happened, and there's going to be more to it because we're not going to see them reunite on next week's episode. Next week's episode is very earthbound, that's probably going to happen more like halfway through this season. Enoch though, and moments later, does start realizing that something is not right. Jemma Simmons, you're not supposed to be here. So yeah, he sort of reunited with them, since kidnapping them on the night they were in the diner, and he's basically gonna start understanding what went wrong, and why he's basically being hunted, along with Fitz. But hey, other things on this episode included the statement, he's a Crapitolian. Now that pretty much makes him from the planet Crap. With that being said though, do let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Do let me know what you think of what I've presented on this video when it comes to theories, to thoughts as to who the Chronocoms represent out of the comics, as to who Enoch represents out of the comics, and as to who Sarge and his team represent out of the comics. Do let me know as well if you do think that this season is all about an Incursion storyline. Finally though, you can let me know if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I post a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into this one, and have a great day.